Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It. I'm your host, Terry Woolman. My guest today is hit producer, artist, Darren Rahn. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well, without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, and we see you there, we do. Hi, everybody. We'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of our show, so make it count in an invite to speak, and we will bring you on stage to join our live conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest before we get started. Darren Rahn's tireless commitment to musical authenticity over the past 18 years has resulted in multiple Grammy nominations and 26 #1 Billboard singles as a solo artist, saxophonist, producer, and mixing engineer. After launching his career in the late 90s, he became the ultimate urban jazz hyphenate as an artist-producer following his success with Wayman Tisdale's #1 hit remake of Ain't No Stopping Us Now. His dual careers reached a unique crescendo when his own single, Talk of the Town, hit #1 on the Billboard Jazz chart, followed by 3 more consecutive #1 productions with artists Dave Koz, Eric Darius, and Tim Bowman. Over the years, as his music and work ethic led to more and more hit recordings, his resume has grown to include 5 Dave Koz albums and collaborations with Toby Keith, Jonathan Butler, Najee, Bob James, Rick Braun, Jeffrey Osborne, Phil Perry, Jeff Lorber, Brian Bromberg, Michael Langton, Kirk Franklin, Jonathan Fritzen, Julian Vaughn, Blake Aaron, LeBron, Riley Richard, and our friend, the late Nick Coleone, and many others. Darren Rahn, welcome to Making It.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, man. It's great to be on with you.
It's my pleasure. We planned this a while ago, and and the time flew by. You know, when you said I can do it, on this date in August, I thought, well, that's worth waiting for, but that's a long time from now. And then here we are. I blinked and another, 3 months passed.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we're here already,
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I see Dr. Lisa, my moderator, is on with us for a minute, just to help get us started. I want to say thank you, Dr. Lisa, and hi.
How's it going, Lisa?
So one of the things that I noticed, I've been listening to your music for a long time, for many, many years, and we've become friends over the last few years, and even more so recently, which I'm totally enjoying. But one of the things, I went back in preparing for our conversation today, been listening to your music again a lot, and you sure love a good melody, don't you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You spend all this time learning how to create music.
Yeah.
And I had early on a couple good friends who I'm sure we'll talk about today that said that very thing. It's all about the melody. And so
right.
Kind of the eternal quest to learn how to write a good melody.
Yeah, and for me, when I'm writing, and I'm wondering about for you as well, it's kind of a treasure hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the magic in a song, finding just the right place to change it up and find every hook possible in every single part in a production and an arrangement, which is, of course, one of the things that I think bonds us together as friends and as fellow musicians. But it's always, the right way of creating art is to open myself up, to be present, and to be curious and see where the song wants to take me.
Exactly. It's, the creative process for me is kind of like that too. I remember there was a a movie back in the day called A League of Their Own. It was a baseball movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he just knew deep down inside he was supposed to create this baseball stadium. And the whole saying of the movie was, build it and they will come.
Right.
And people often ask me about my creative process in writing songs, and they'll say, well, up front, I'm hearing this and this and this and this. And I'm typically not that way. I'll have some little nugget, whether it's a melodic idea or a groove or a feeling or an emotion, and you really capitalize on that and just kind of start exploring that, and then it starts to kind of unfold into what it wants to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Speaking of sayings,
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention that back in the day when you were working with Wayman Tisdale on his chart-topping version of Ain't No Stopping Us Now, he gave you a piece of advice that you've taken to heart on every subsequent musical endeavor that you've been involved in. Stay in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, what did those words mean to you at the time, and has the meaning evolved over the years?
It's just become more real. The more you do music, the more you collaborate with people, the more you begin to understand who you are and finding your place amongst all these other people in the industry. Early on, sometimes there's so much pressure to be a specific something.
Right.
And I've found that as an artist, that journey for me really has become the opposite. Well, wait, how do I shed all of that and figure out who I am? And so as time has gone by, that what Wayman told me becomes more and more real in my life and my career. And, he prefaced it by saying, don't be a fool. Stay in your own lane.
Right.
So that was, it was great advice. And that was coming from someone who, that's why he was so successful. And it just so happened that Wayman Tisdale's lane was a little wider than many of us, but he saw that. He realized that he had to be authentic in who he was.
Mm-hmm. As both an athlete and an artist, a musician.
Exactly.
It's interesting to hear you use the word wide or wider regarding to lane, because I was just thinking the same of you. Your lane is fairly wide. I suppose mine is as well. But, when I read your credits, on production, of course you play sax and, all of the horns, but you play guitar and keyboards and you program, and, I've seen in singing on some of the songs, and I've seen on multiple tracks, wah-wah guitar, which one of my favorite personal things, but so I guess I applaud you, and I'm for embracing all of the things, not limiting yourself, but also, have you found that sometimes it's confusing to people that you can do more than one thing?
Maybe sometimes, but amongst the list of credits and things that we do, there's the things that we do best.
Right.
And so it's the things where we spend most of our time. So of course I've had a few vocal credits, and I've hacked out a couple little wah guitar parts over the year. But truth be told, I'm a saxophonist and a keyboard player.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes just the need for a color, or even just when you're mocking up a song.
Right.
And oftentimes the intention is, once the song is ready,
I'll replace it.
Not just replace it, I'll call the real deal, right?
Well, that's what I meant. Yeah, you'll bring in.
And so some of those elements that cut through, aside from saxophone, maybe flute, and keyboards, a lot of those credits, they're things that, maybe we thought we were going to replace, and in the end, they were missed when they were gone. And so, and maybe because I'm not a serious guitar player, maybe I played something slightly different, or in a way that someone wouldn't normally do it, and on a particular tune, maybe it stuck.
Right.
But it's whatever the tune calls for. More often than not, my approach is finding the right people and letting them bring their thing to it.
Casting.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I know you know all about that, Terry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important to surround yourself with greatness and to choose the right people for each song, project, production,
Yeah.
performance. And then, bring everybody to the river's end so that they can then drink, so they can,
Right.
leave room for them to be themselves as well. Not
Exactly.
micromanage all these amazing people that we surround ourselves with.
And really honestly, and I think this comes back to stay in your lane, and I can't say that everyone I've worked with has that mentality, but the majority of the successful people, both in music and outside of music,
Right,
that I know they've learned that, because we've all been given such unique gifts and our own set of eyes, our own set of ears, our own imaginations. And, when you talk about creating music, my thought is hopefully there's a depth to it that lasts, that stands. And so as much as maybe I can impart into a track, I would be remiss if I didn't really create space for others to broaden it and make it even,
greater,
more.
more,
Yeah.
to make it more.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, this is something that I remind people of at the end of the show, but my intuition or just my heart was saying that I wanted to do a shameless plug at the beginning of the show today for you, but actually for both of us. But we both have new singles that are out on the radio right now. And I think it's so important. We're going to be talking about yours, of course, but I think it's so important for people to understand the value of subscribing to our Spotify channels. It
Big
is
time.
the way that we are able to bring you our recorded music at no charge to you. And more importantly, it's your way that you get to be a part of keeping recorded music alive.
Yeah.
So please go to Darren Ron at Spotify channel and just start listening to Darren, to your new record, Rock the World, and your new single, and go to my Spotify page as well for my new single, What Is Hip, and just share it with everybody. We want you to, we need you to. So that business out of the way, but there's a reason. It doesn't cost you anything except not even 5 minutes of your time, literally 2.
Well,
So,
and Terry, to that end too, there's so many great artists on Spotify, and of course, like even in our genre, it's so broad, the number of artists, and I think even myself included, sometimes we can have a little bit of tunnel vision in terms of our musical taste or things we're checking out. And yeah, what you said, for artists right now, and particularly artists, young, talented artists that are trying to pave their way and create a future in music. Right now, Spotify is one of the biggest ways people can support what we do. Listening to our music on Spotify.
Listen, don't just subscribe, enjoy it.
Right.
Yeah, explore it. And anybody and everybody. It's an interactive activity in sport. It's not a one way. Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about your new single for a moment, and then I want to get personal about some other things, and then we'll get back to talking about music. But we're going to be talking about life itself and other things. So your new album, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a COVID album, as is mine.
Yeah, the COVID album. And, as always happens when you finish an album, people are already saying, when's the next one coming?
And the answer to that is?
It's not.
Right.
It's not coming yet.
Right.
So, doing a full album, and this, we're kind of in a single driven market right now. And I've experimented with both sides of the full albums versus the singles. It's enough work to put out a single, but to put out a full album of works that are kind of cohesive and meaningful is a huge, huge undertaking. And I think for artists that really aim to do it well, sometimes there's a mentality of like, okay, one album per year. I think for people who are really looking to really dig into the music. Yeah, an album can be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Um, and so it's really a beautiful thing to get to the end of that process and be able to say it's done, it's finished, it's out there, So it's been a few months and I'm still a little bit in shock that it got done.
Right. Well, it was not for the faint-hearted to record these virtual global remote sessions with everybody that we did them with, and
Mm-hmm.
bravo to you for digging in and doing that. I know what it takes.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, and really I felt so blessed, during a time that's been so difficult in our world,
Yeah.
that I had something to really dig into, and I think also too the music and the meaning of the music and kind of this whole build it and they will come mentality. You start on something and maybe you have an idea of what you want it to be, but then I think if you're really paying attention to what it's supposed to be, for me, I realized, wow, some of this music I started years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was brand new that it started during the pandemic. But when I look at it in the end and at the finish line, it's incredible. It was meant for that timing. It was meant to come out when it did, and a lot of what we've been through as society, as a world, is coming through emotionally in that music.
Well, I also know, because we have spoken about this off the air, that your intention was to create some joy in a time
Yes,
where
yeah.
we all needed joy individually. Personally, we needed it,
Mhm.
but we needed to lift each other, the world, with everything that was going on.
Right. Yeah, I'm always of the mindset of approaching music honestly.
Hmm.
And sometimes that can be a bit of a what's the word? A bit of a journey when you're trying to, you've got sometimes just the raw music that comes out of you. Then you've got the business side of things that says, okay, my desire is not just for me to create music I like, but also to connect with people and hopefully make a difference in their lives, right?
Hmm.
And so that the business side and the commercial side of music starts to come into play there. What people like, what they don't like. People tend to have shorter attention spans these days.
Hmm.
And so finding that balance between music that really speaks to people, but also maintaining the honesty, integrity, of
Hmm.
who we are as artists.
Right. So, it's so interesting to me because your intention is really clear. We also know that there's music out there that is very successful where the intention is to just come up with a cool drum groove and slap a little melody over it that is not always the easiest to sing if your life depended on it, walking away. But they still, some of those songs ride up the charts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And which means that they're relatable. People
Yeah.
relate to the beat and to all of that, and to the flashy soloing and the great sounding records that they are. You and I lean more towards a melodic approach,
Mm-hmm.
um, never sacrificing a strong groove.
Mm-hmm.
But what's your perspective on that? That rises to the top as well as something that has a very different intention.
You know, if you'd asked me that question 5 or 10 years ago,
Hmm.
I probably would have started answering it before you finish asking me the question. Um, because I have pretty particular musical tastes. Um, and there's this thing in music that what people like is so subjective.
Yeah.
I grew up, the music that really moved me, a majority of it tend to have a pretty deep meaning, or it would evoke very, very meaningful emotions. But I've talked to some people who are very musically astute, and their perspective is a little different. Their perspective is, I think it's just more how it makes you feel in the moment.
Hmm.
And for some people, that means deeper meaning, maybe a deeper groove. different sonic elements. But for other people, maybe that literally means like, hey man, I don't need all that information coming at me at one time. I just want to chill, and I just want something that doesn't really challenge me.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough challenging me in life. I don't need music to do the same. And so I think you get people on both sides.
Right. That makes sense.
I've always kind of sought for the deeper stuff. And I think if I listen to music historically, the stuff that tends to stand the test of time is the stuff that had a little more thought put into it and maybe hold some of that deeper meaning. But, there's no hard, fast rule to all of that either.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for answering that. It's interesting to get your perspective. Yeah.
And maybe without rocking the boat too much, you probably, this notion of the things that are rising up the chart. I guess we're here to be candid. So I'll be candid, but with grace. My experience, the time that I've done this, and I'm sure you can concur with this, or maybe not, but it tells me that music goes through phases.
Mm-hmm.
Listenership, radio stations, consumption of music goes through phases. What people want changes. And there's certain things kind of maybe that they always want, but maybe today, maybe right now, or say 2 years ago, it was, oh man, there's too much programmed music. We need more live drums. We need more live musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the industry scrambled back towards, live musicians. And we're going through a phase right now where consumers, and at least feedback I'm getting, consumers and even radio stations are saying, yeah, it's starting to sound a little bit too much the same again. And so, personally, I've seen things kind of swing back the other direction now for this season.
Mm-hmm.
A little more programming, a little more, non-real musicians, not exclusively,
right,
but in terms of stuff that's maybe doing well on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it ebbs and flows,
And that information, when you get that feedback, you just incorporate it into the gumbo of what you do. It doesn't.
I consider it within the
Mm-hmm.
context of what the song is asking for.
Yeah, right.
So if a song is saying this is what, if it's what this needs to be, then so be it. But it also can be one of those things that you consider and say, okay, yeah, time to change it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Time to make sure that, artistically things aren't getting too stagnant. And so as much of a challenge as it can be, and I get the phone calls, hey man, I saw this thing on the chart and it seems to be doing real well and I can't understand it. And to which my answer is, well, I don't have the answer.
Right.
But challenging ourselves, trying to maintain integrity while also making sure that we're not stagnant and reinventing ourselves. This is important. And I think for any artist or producer, even mix engineers that have been around and done it a long time, people may really appreciate what we do, and that's great. But at the same time, I think it's important that we take the cue and say, okay, time to change it up in some sort of way, or add some skills to my arsenal, maybe use some different collaborations, different musicians. Mm-hmm. I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, collaborating is a really fantastic and stimulating ride. Yeah, I love it. I love getting inside the head and the spirit and the intention of mm-hmm. other people in any way. And again, we're not, right. This whole conversation is not just about music, it's about life.
Of course. And really that translates into life as well.
Yeah.
This idea, if we learned anything in the last couple of years, it's that at some point we have to adapt and adjust. And pivot, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
We do it musically, we have to do it in life, and it doesn't. We can have differing perspectives on that. I'm not one that thinks that, my way or the highway. We all in life. I will say this, and this is gonna pivot our conversation, Terry. I flash back to my childhood. I grew up on a farm in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and surrounding us, my best friends, on one side, a household whose lifestyle and faith was very different from mine. On the other side of us, a little more similar. Next door to us, neighbors that had just moved from Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
There was this melting pot of people in our neighborhood. But we grew up in an era where we respected one another, And I'm going to say a word that today is kind of a hot button, the word tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
It means something different now than it did then.
Mm-hmm.
Tolerance now is more intrinsic. If someone doesn't tolerate me or what I think or what I believe, I might take offense to that. I need someone to tolerate me. Back then it was the other way around. It was extrinsic. It was, I hold very strongly to the things that I'm convicted about, but I can love you. I can interact with you. I can partake in your life without feeling like you have to be just like me. And I can still even hold to our differences without disrespect. Even if there's something I feel deeply, strongly about that I don't agree with in your life, I may not enable it, but I'm not going to hate you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be respectful. And I think that is very different than the way it is today. Today, there's a real polarizing. So life and music, these things kind of exist in both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think important for us to figure out how to navigate that gracefully.
Yeah, very well said. I agree with you. I'm reminded of years ago. I was up in Santa Barbara. There's a beautiful church up there, and my cousin Glenn was a doctor. He was the head of the trauma center up there at Cottage Hospital. So he was friends with the ministers and the fathers and the pastors and the rabbis, like everybody, the community, because he was a triage doctor, and oftentimes they would call in clergy to be with a family or with somebody as they were dying. And so I got like sort of a backstage tour of that beautiful monastery that's up in Santa Barbara.
Nice.
And got to know one of the head, people there who ran, of faith. I forget what his title was, but one of the things that was really cool was he had this beautiful curiosity and openness, and tolerance in the good use, the old school use of the word, of him not needing to be right or the only, his deep faith. He had given his life over to God, to serving God, and being married to the church, but he didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. He still had a great sense of humor. As a matter of fact, like he was wearing, a brown robe and a rope belt.
Yep.
And he had a pager on the belt a long time ago.
Nice.
And I just said, "May I ask you a question? What's the pager for?" And he said, he pointed upwards to God.
It's a direct line to God.
Yeah, in case God needs to find me quickly, And it was just so funny to me. But we talked about that, and we talked about that he would get together with people of different faith all the time, and they would enjoy not debating, but just reviewing and looking through each other's perspective of what God and religion meant to them. And their goal wasn't to be right. They weren't trying to convert anybody. They were broadening their look. their perspective.
Right.
And
Right.
I found that so refreshing because that was not my experience growing up in organized religion.
Right. Right. And I don't think that's many people's experience either.
Right.
My perspective is quite different than a lot of people. I see this prevailing thought in the world of all paths lead to God and many paths. And in full candor, I don't believe that. And we don't need to get into the depth of all that.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying, when we can honestly discourse with care for one another and without just putting ourselves first, that can be such a beneficial thing. It can cause us, if we're being honest, if we're being honest with ourselves, if we're being honest about our place in this world, I think it can cause us to really examine what we believe and why we believe it. So I think healthy discourse can, in some ways, it can affirm things that we have invested into in our
Mm-hmm.
belief system, and sometimes it can challenge us to really look at something and say, okay, maybe I have to give this a little bit more thought,
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, just like the music industry, faith, life, music. Well, I look back when I rewind, when I rewind 30, 35 years, I rewind to a young man who I thought pretty much had it figured out.
Did you grow up in a strong faith-based home? Or is that something that came later in life?
No, I did.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, like I mentioned, though, in our community, I was exposed to a wide range. And I was taught never to mistreat others, for any differences. Because you and I know from talking together, that I'm Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that word because Christian comes from Jesus Christ. Christ, mm-hmm. Christian. I say that not hesitantly because I'm very, very proud of my faith. But the world we live in, it teaches some versions of Christ that don't make sense to me. I think even amongst differences, I think most people, not all, I've talked to some people who have differing perspectives, but most people I talk to believe that God is love. The things like, evil, pain, difficulties, these are, most people believe these are not of God. They're either the result of human, we have free will, we make choices, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes they're the result of evil, darkness, people whose hearts are not pointing that way. And so anyways, this world we live in now, though, there seems to be a notion that everyone can just think what they want to think and believe what they want to believe. And I take a little different stance, Terry. Maybe one of the best ways I can describe it is inside, I have a sense of the truth and the reality of God. Just like when I walk outside my house every day, most days the sun is shining. And it's an inevitable fact that the sun is there. If it wasn't, even on the rainy days, mm-hmm. if the sun wasn't there, if we were,
we're talking about Colorado, by the way.
Colorado, yeah. We do get a lot of sun. But the entire Earth, if we were just a little bit closer to the sun, the Earth would burn up. If mm-hmm. we were just a little further away from the sun, we would freeze.
Right.
It's a very delicate balance. But the truth is, we get up every day and the sun is there. Whether we see it or not, it's there. And it's real. And we need it. And so I think that's very much the way I view God. He's there. We need him. Some people would reject that. They would say, mm-hmm. no, there's not. And, to me, that's like saying there's no sun. I'm going to go stand out in the sun. I do not believe in the sun. Well, if you stand in the sun too long, you'll believe in the sun because it'll, the natural effects of it will burn your skin.
Well, also I've heard the phrase, you don't have to believe in gravity for it to exist.
Right, right. So with that said, the basis of my Christian faith really is Jesus as the Bible describes Jesus. And this is a man, God incarnate, who walked the earth,
Can
who
I
loved well.
can you hold that thought for a second? Because I want to
Yes.
interject so we don't lose anybody
Okay.
as you start talking about Jesus and they have the opportunity to shut down if that's not their default or
Sure.
mindset. You're a big part of your life. You're very involved in church and community outreach, but by church, you've said to me, not religion, but relationship with God and service
Yeah.
to others and spirituality.
Right. Right.
Which I think in that context, can you repeat what you were just saying about
Yeah, and actually
Jesus?
that's perfect that you said that, because I was going to talk about how we live our lives and how it impacts others, right?
Hmm.
And so with that said, you mentioned that we've kind of all had our experiences spiritually, and in my opinion, and I would concur with most people, there have been, and perhaps modern day Christianity, North American Christianity, has hurt more people. I can't even tell you the number of people I know that have been destroyed in the name of religion,
Hmm.
in the name of an experience they had at church or whatnot. And so for me, that makes me examine my belief as a Christian and what that means. And so what I was going to say is that I think we're living largely in a post-Christian America. There was a time when it was the predominant religion, and I think now, even though a lot of people claim it, maybe a lot of people don't really understand that the basis of it is the love of God and the
Hmm.
true love of God. It's not an do whatever you want, be the best you. No, I think sometimes the best us is rooted in humility. It's rooted in concern for how do my actions impact you, Terry? How do my actions impact the people I'm working with in the music industry, the neighbor next door, the people in my own house? And so, for me, it's been
And
a
even
really,
you on stage as a live performer,
of course,
this is still part of your awareness, intention, in everything that you do.
yeah. And growing up for me, I saw a lot more really kind of like there wasn't maybe enough thought about how does this impact others. And so
Hmm.
faith,
Right.
music, life, how do I take what I've been given and package this truthfully? So I don't want to compromise, but I really genuinely want to help others. I really genuinely want to be a light in this world. I don't want to just hoard it all to myself. I'm not just looking for number one hits, and I'm not just looking for things to come my way, but rather
Hmm.
I'm looking to take the gifts God has given me, my music, my life, my resources, my faith, and to use those to impact other people
And your
and make a
life,
difference in their lives.
and by your life, just to fill in a little bit more of the blank, that includes being a husband to Priscilla, a father,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and many many other things. But that
Hmm.
it sounds like this informs. Well, how could it not? Everything that you do.
For me, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, that stay in your lane thing that Wayman shared me with those years
What
ago
was the
comes
first
into,
part of the quote?
hey, don't be a fool.
Don't be a fool.
Stay in your lane. That comes into play here too, because for me, when I look at it, that I have to be honest about who I am and about who I believe God created me to be. And of course, like life, it's a growing process. I think this notion of I'm always leery when I see someone who thinks or feels that they've arrived because, you know, I think back to you might be able to share some of these things too, Terry, the greatest moments of our career success.
Sure. Yeah.
Or maybe if we took that visual and we overlaid what was going on in our life at the time, it might there are moments where maybe those peaks align,
Mm-hmm.
but often not. Often not. There's, it's both sides of the coin, right? Triumph
Yeah.
and tragedy, dealing with the difficulties that we might go through in life, and using music as an aid to help us kind of push through that or overcome that. So it's kind of this constant back and forth and balance between them.
You talk about balance a lot in your life and in your music. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that you said is you were talking about music, but you said, I try my best to keep it balanced. You were talking about being a producer and being a solo artist and keeping that all together. You said, when I'm in the studio, I usually let the producer take the lead. I'm almost always in producer mode, making sure what is being played serves the song best. So once again, we're talking about balance. We're talking about being of service to music, to the song, to the people that you are working with and collaborating with, to the people that are going to be listening to this, and serving the people that you don't even know or haven't met yet, or they're still in the equation for you. And I think your faith is really something that serves all of that in a very beautiful way.
I'm growing. I'm growing. It's a journey. It's a journey. In my faith, Christ gave everything for me, and in a world that says, do what you want to do. Here's, reach all these achievements, all these. But my heart is telling me, it's not that those things are bad. I mean, it's wonderful. I'll admit those peaks and those times when it's all kind of clicking and happening. That's, man, I appreciate those times so much. But I also know they don't last forever. They're going to come. They're going to go. And then I'm still going to be sitting here saying, okay, what is my calling? And so I'm speaking once again about me. I know that for me, that balance of using my creativity, but really working with others, serving others, delivering something to others that hopefully helps their life. I was having years ago. I want to share something that happened at a gig years ago. This was kind of as my career was really starting to take off, and I had been asked to play at a really prominent festival, and there was
which,
a lot
by
of,
the way, happened. It feels to me from the outside looking in, that some of those things happen pretty quickly, or you kind of exploded in a really interesting way, headlining, co-headlining with a lot of major artists at festivals, Catalina Jazz Festival, for example, that are not easy to get booked into.
I think, really honestly, it's like anything else. So the public sees someone burst onto the scene,
Right.
They don't necessarily see the 2 or 3 decades before that.
The 30-year overnight success that you had. Right.
Exactly. I mean, I'll be candid. I turned 50 in December, so I'm half a century old, and I've been doing this since I was, literally my mid-teens.
Right.
Is when I started pursuing music professionally, and so there was easily 15, maybe almost 20 years before that quote big break came with Wayman. And
by the way, if you don't mind me interjecting, I believe you got a master's degree or were studying for a master's degree at the in music at the University of Northern Colorado. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had done my master's degree in jazz pedagogy, or saxophone pedagogy and jazz studies, and then
so you've put the work in.
I did, and I was actually a year away from my doctorate when I left school. And I'm not going to suggest that for anyone. I just knew in my heart I was supposed to go out and start doing this.
And start. That's courageous. It's courageous to do something like that.
But those festivals, so then by the time those started happening, people were like, "Oh my gosh, who is this guy?" Right? When they didn't really see the 20 years before that.
Sure.
But I was at this one particular performance, and it was a high profile festival with a lot of people. And I had done this performance, and it was one of those days where, the call came in late to come to the gig. There were issues with other artists that were supposed to be on there that couldn't make it, and then the band and coming in from Colorado, and it wasn't the regular configuration of a band I normally use, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm on stage, and I remember distinctly in the middle of the show, in the middle of one of the songs, my perspective was that it was falling apart. One of the musicians in the band just started playing chords that it wasn't the song, it was something else. And I was blowing my horn, and someone else on stage seemed to be in another place. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is not how I had it pictured here right now. Crowd seemed to be enjoying it just fine. Got done with the gig, and I was back at the CD table, and it was more, we had a long CD line, actually. It was about a half hour, 45 minutes to get everyone through. And
nice.
The last person standing there was a frail looking lady who was very soft spoken, and she came up to me and she said, Darren, she said, I waited to the end of the line because I had something important I wanted to share with you. And she said, a month or two ago today, I was diagnosed with cancer, terminal. And she said, my world has been just darkness since that moment that the doctor told me. And she looked at me and she said, today when you were performing, and she named the name of the song, and she said, right in the middle of that song when you were soloing, and it indeed was the very moment that everything was out of my control. I was mortified on stage internally by what was going on. And she described the moment, and it was that exact moment. And she said, Darren, I want to thank you. She said, that moment was the first time I have smiled since my diagnosis. And I was holding back tears. I mean, I felt so, what a moment to learn right there. Once again, this realization, it's not all about us. And we may never know what, something we've done musically, if we're doing it for the right reason, we may never know how it's going to reach someone and touch someone. But that was a great moment of teaching for me that, yes, it's good to have confidence. Yes, it's good to, present ourselves in a certain way as artists, but ultimately to realize it's so much bigger than us. And some of those moments that are not in our control, those might be some of the times when we can be used to reach people in the greatest ways, So huge lesson for me.
Yeah. And a beautiful gift for each of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's spectacular. Yeah. We just never know. And again, we're talking about in the context of music, but that is the same conversation, smiling at somebody in line with you at the grocery store, even with a mask on, if that's the case.
Yes, yeah.
Right now, and seeing in your eyes, and
you could see it in someone's eyes, even with the mask on.
Just
Terry,
being kind. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've talked about recently. We've talked about that notion of smiling and the way that we present ourselves to other people. This is there's tough things in this life.
Yeah,
I know you've been through tough things. I know I've been through tough things. But yeah, I think it's part of growth too, reaching a point where we realize that our interactions with other people, gosh, they're so meaningful. Maybe the most meaningful things in life, not how we're feeling at the moment, but how we can take our life and our experience, good and bad, and package that into something that can impact someone else's life positively.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, sometimes perhaps what's the point of going through some of these challenges if there's not growth, right?
Right. And And, you mentioned being imperfect. And, to me, I look at that imperfection as long as you people are willing to grow and take these opportunities and embrace them. The imperfections of people, I think, and the imperfections in myself and, and my friends, I see a perfection in that. I mean, there's something, we're not supposed to be perfect. We're just supposed to do the best that we can as often as we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By the way, if anybody in our live virtual audience would like to jump in with a question or comment, just make a request and we'll bring you up on stage.
Yeah.
But go on, Darren.
Yeah, it's this to me is where music, daily life, faith, spirituality, this is to me where they are inseparable.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a very compartmentalized world. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe sometimes it's, we in life we try to protect ourselves. Our guard is up, maybe because of something we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's really where the rubber meets the road. See, even in my faith, if I say the word Christian right now, honestly, in the world we live in now, a lot of people are going to have kind of a visceral negative response to that.
Right.
And
this even came up when you were writing your bio for Fireside, putting it in, and you asked me, what about putting Christian? Because
I've got part of my bio says follower of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Now that's a lot of words in a world where we're restricted to a certain number of characters.
Right.
So, Darren Rahn, artist, husband, father, CEO, follower of Jesus Christ. It doesn't all fit.
Right.
So having to figure out, okay, so what gets cut? Okay. The human reaction would say, oh, well, follower of Jesus Christ, that's too long. I'm going to take that out.
Right.
But really for me, that's really the most important part of who I am. And so,
I also thought that it might open the door for more people to want to know more about you.
It could be
as well.
And what I'd like to, I'm not going to blast people.
Right.
Honestly, unless someone knows me, and that's where things become real. When someone knows me, you and I, we've initially just met kind of briefly, and you invited me on stage and we played and we had a nice little musical moment. But as time has gone by, we begin to get to know each other. And, in this world where the word Christian or Christ really creates a visceral reaction in a lot of people, I'd like to say, I understand that, for me, I'm not, my faith, my belief in God, it's not that I have it all figured out. It's exactly the opposite. I am an imperfect person. I've lived through enough to realize I don't have the answers. And so I'm thankful that I believe in God who has answers. I don't have the answers. He has the answers. So my journey towards Christ is about that. I'm an imperfect person. I am not the guy who has it all figured out. And so I thank God that, he gave me his son, Jesus, and to fill that void and that gap in my life. A perfect God and an imperfect person, I would say to myself, okay, I need the perfect God. I don't need more of the imperfect person. And my experience in life, musically and non, would verify that. Yeah, the moments where myself came forward, myself, what do we, id, ego, whatever, when that part starts to project and become the leader, my experience is, that's when a lot of the difficulties in my life presented themselves is when there was too much self and there wasn't enough God, when there was too much self and there wasn't enough thinking of others, so that's my experience.
I really appreciate you sharing that and sharing it so candidly and openly. And as a person who grew up Jewish, it's really easy for me. I want to hear you speak about this because the thing is, you are one of my friends. This is not just pointed towards Christianity or any one particular organized religion, but
Mm-hmm.
you are one of my friends who has a strong spiritual practice, and you don't preach, you just walk the walk. And those are my favorite kind of people who live in their practice, their daily practice of whatever it is that they believe, hopefully for positive, and
Yeah.
not the daily practice of hatred and bigotry and some of those things that have become more popular again in our country.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear you talk about it. I feel you're just spreading some light.
It ties so deeply back into the music. One of the
Yeah,
questions I
well, yeah.
get a lot from people is, can you talk? I mean, so the name of your show is Making It
Mm-hmm.
with Terry, and of course you embrace a much broader view of making it, not just making it with a song or to the top of the charts, but you know, it, embracing the scope of life with that.
Right.
And one of the most common questions I get is, "Gosh, I want to be like you when I grow up," or "How did you get there? What did you do?" And we started the show with that quote from Wayman, "Stay in your lane." It's so profound. It's so accurate. It's so much deeper. It has proven to be true in every single area of my life. And I can say in full honesty, the reason that I am where I am right now, if people want to ask me about how do I produce, how do I write, playing saxophone, mixing, mastering, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it started with serving others. My plan as a young man was it was simple. It was me, me, me. I
Right.
Darren, the saxophonist, the that was it. There was no thought of production or mixing, or I wasn't the kid that sat at home and listened to Quincy Jones productions or whoever. I wasn't. I did grow up with music. I loved music. I listened to records intensely. I never paid attention to who mixed it. I never paid attention to who produced it, but I did pay attention to what it sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started my journey in the music industry, every time that I helped others, the career went forward.
Hmm.
When I was strictly focused on
Say that
myself,
again for the people in the back of the house.
yeah, when I helped others, my career moved forward.
Mm-hmm.
And when the focus became solely me, 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 man, the number of brick walls that I hit
Hmm.
time after time after time, I'm by nature a little more stubborn. It took me a while to figure out, like, okay, Darren, I mean, how long are you going to keep running against those brick walls before you
Yeah.
realize that when you're doing what you're supposed to do, the door's open? And so, sure enough, through helping others, through working with others, through learning from others, collaborating with others, the door's open for me. And even in that, though, not to abandon helping others. So people asked me at one point in my career, will you stop producing? Will you stop mixing? Will you just focus on your music? Well, I knew deep down inside I wasn't supposed to do that. So I
Mm-hmm.
continued to work with others while I was doing my own music. And then fast forward to 2020, and this was a moment of confirmation in my life when the world completely shut down.
Mm.
And 30 years of working for others had laid the foundation for provision for my family. This was a
Mm-hmm.
God moment.
Right.
God, why? Why am I always, oh man, I'm working on this, and this project maybe wasn't so much fun, or this person might have been a little difficult to work with, and a lot of great people too that are great to work with.
Yeah.
But in 2020, I realized, wow, how fortunate am I now? I'm set up to succeed because I stayed in my lane. And for everyone, that's going to look different. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, Now I'm at home, the world's shut down, masks on everyone's faces, and my phone started ringing maybe more than ever. And I realized in that moment, wow, God really is a lot smarter than I am. Because now here I am at home in my pajamas. I can't even get out of my pajamas before the phone's ringing for work. And realized what a gift that was, that those previous 3 decades had set me up for this moment in history that was going to change our world forever.
And it also meant that when you reached out and made the calls for your record, the answer was a resounding yes.
Yeah, people were there and ready and willing.
Yeah, and you had, I'm going to read a quote of yours. Everyone put their heart and soul into this project, using the gift of music to cultivate a creative space full of hope and healing in the midst of everything that's going on in the world today. So we all needed to gather in any way we could, which meant remotely from our own studios, to lift each other.
Yeah.
And it comes through in the music, and some of the artists, I'll just name a few
Sure.
for fans of music. Your album "Rock the World" features Dave Koz, Brian Culbertson, Najee, Everette Harp, Brian Bromberg. Also, Mel Brown on bass, Tarell Martin, your twin brother Jason on trumpet, guitarist, including yourself, Randy Jacobs, Alan Hinds, Adam Hawley, and Paul Jackson Jr. As if any one of them wouldn't be enough. All wonderful players, and your wife Priscilla played flute, and just great, beautiful collaborations that I know you must be very proud of and grateful for.
Oh, for sure. And I'm proud to say, Terry, that what these incredible musicians and people brought to this project was, such a beautiful thing. And they don't all hold. I don't just surround myself with people who think the same as me.
Well, that'd be kind of boring.
It would be boring. It would be really boring. Some share my faith, some don't. Some have different musical tastes. Some have very similar musical tastes. But bringing each song, who's going to play on this, who's best for this particular part, and bringing those people in and really letting them, pour their souls out musically. Man, talk about making it. That's what made it. That's what made it. I can sit down here all day and I enjoy, writing and programming and, turning all these knobs back here. But having that interaction with people who, each and every one of them in their own right, just complete and utter musical geniuses.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was a gift.
Yeah. My experience was very similar, and also shared with a few of the same musicians as well. Bob James and Najee, and
oh man,
and Greg Manning, and just some beautiful players as well. But even like Ricky Cash in India, I thought, well, we're all at home. It might as well. It doesn't need to be on this continent. So,
right.
I just really cast the net even wider. I just thought, I want to do a collaboration with my friend Ricky and co-write with him instead of me just sending him the whole thing. But I want it to be half American musicians and half Indian musicians.
Nice.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not completely go full global on these experiences of lifting each other?
Yeah, and you're right. It was a time where everyone was at home, so
and available.
To receive a no during that time period really said something about someone. I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't think I received any no's. I think pretty much most everyone I reached out to responded, and once again too, musically, and this, being a music creator. Those collaborations, really thinking about who's right for this song.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's when you have the right person and just let them do what they do. It's such a beautiful thing, you know. And I know for
Absolutely.
that, for people, you probably have the same thing. You'll send someone a song idea, and I think any serious artist, the first thing they're do is going to listen to that and examine it and say, okay, is this something that I can really bring something to the party with?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think if that box is checked, then yeah, then you just let go, and it's kind of free game for all people involved. Let them do what they do.
Yeah. By the way, I just neglected to I didn't want to make this about me in giving credits, but I neglected to mention our friend Andy Snitzer on sax, who played on my new
Oh
single as
man,
well.
you
Another
guys,
opportunity.
yeah, what a beautiful collaboration between you guys. And on a
Thanks.
song, by the way, on a song, one of my all-time favorites,
Mine
One
too.
Step,
Yeah.
Tower of Power, uh, that you guys took it and really made it your own. Like,
Right.
I have to admit, from a production standpoint, that song had such an influence on me.
Oh,
And
likewise.
Tower of Power in general.
Yeah.
I just give you credit. I think if I had redone it, it probably would sounded a little bit too much like the original.
Mm-hmm.
But you really found a way to make that your own, and both you and Andy, what you brought to it, really, really gave it its own little thing.
Thank you.
You know,
That means a
yeah.
lot to me. Yeah, I wanted to pay homage and put my own spin on it too, because certainly as a horn arranger, we both are horn arrangers, but for me, besides going to school, of course, and really getting great training, but my biggest influences were Tower of Power and Jerry Hay. That's where I learned how to write for horns. So to really approach a song like that, I knew I needed to do it differently or not do it
Right,
at
right,
all. And
yeah,
but what was interesting, because we're talking about casting and also collaboration, each person who played on the record, we had the same conversation, which is, how far can I sway from the original? With Will Lee on bass, the only parts that got tracked live were bass and drums, and then COVID hit. That was the first
hmm,
song on the record that I had started, but Will Lee was in town from New York, and so he and John Robinson, and I were in the room
yep,
together. I had already recorded the keyboards with Greg Manning, and that was separately, and I had done
hmm,
my guitars and like fleshed out the arrangement like you do as well, to give them point of view. Being prepared to lose my Fender Rhodes parts, so that somebody else could do a greater job, to bring more to
hmm,
it. Or keep some of the parts, that again are missed. There's something missing if you take them out. But regardless, I remember being in the room with the two of them, and we had a conversation even about 16th notes. Whether do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Do we play the 16th note Rocco Prestia freight train of
hmm,
propelling the song? And I said, we 16th notes we can still do, but there are other things that are built into the arrangement to make them uniquely our own. So I want it to be my approach and our collective approach,
right.
without trying to be so different. Like, again, if yes, absolutely play 16th notes.
It's the song is driven by 16th notes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. And so, but same conversation with everybody on the track was, uh, basically, I still want to feel you. I
hmm,
want you to insert yourself. I've already inserted myself into this story and this different point of view as a guitar player and as an arranger. So I've laid the foundation for this. But if I wanted it to be the same, I would have asked David Garibaldi to play
right,
drums.
right.
And I thought about it because I thought, well, that would be really cool to kind of mix it up. But I thought, I I need it to be different. So let me bring in another world-class drummer, John
Yeah, of
Robinson, and
course.
let it be his,
Yep,
we're all the biggest fans of David Garibaldi,
right, right.
so let's give our point of view,
Yeah,
but everybody kind of asked permission in a way, or I granted permission and encouraged them to just insert themselves into the story, which
and
you would
doing
typically do.
remakes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, go ahead.
sorry, I cut you off.
Well, you're the king of redoing remakes and making them interesting.
I have kind of a distinct philosophy about remakes. I think there's two ways to do a remake.
Yeah.
You either pay direct homage to the original, and if you do that, it better be as good, or dare I say better, than the original. I don't know if it can be better, but it needs to be, if you're going to do it very similar to the original, it better be really, really excellent.
Right.
Or you take it and you change it up and make it different enough that it but also similarly done well enough that it does not disgrace the original.
It honors.
My philosophy is it's kind of either or. And I think for people that try to get onto the fence there, well, should it be like the original? Should it be different? My advice, get off the fence.
Right. Exactly.
Pay direct homage and do it really well, or go the other way and do something really fresh and new with it. And I've been on both sides of that. And and you learn so much when you're recreating or doing someone else's music. Boy, that's a real opportunity for growth. Because what would naturally come out of you might be different. So and I've experienced both sides of that. I just finished working on a project with my friend Dave Kaz, and we've done so much. I just love working with him.
I do too.
And his well of creativity is just incredible. And I can't say much about the project right now, but I will say this much. It did include a cover and approaching it from a completely new standpoint. And really, really proud of what we came up with. But it's something that's kind of unexpected. And it would have, honestly, in this case, would have been easier to go back and just try to do it more like an original. But there's also times in my career where where a song moved me so much, and I just really wanted to be able to do it in kind of a similar way. I did that with Wayman guesting, actually. What You Gonna Do for Me? Shaka Khan's version. And a handful of years after that, I was playing at a jazz festival, and I didn't even know. I didn't realize that the guys in Average White Band had written that with Shaka. I didn't know this. They performed it on their gig. And I remember their sax player coming up to me in the green room saying, "We just want to let you know we love your remake."
Oh, how great.
Of our song. And I didn't even realize, because Shaka was the front person. She had done that version. And they said, so much so that they said, "Are you playing it today?" And I said, "Yeah, we were." And he said, "Good. We're taking it out of our set list because we really like the way you did it." And I was
kidding.
I was absolutely floored.
Wow.
Fred, sax player, Fred Vigdor, had told me, and then they were gracious. They brought me up on stage in their show and let me sit in. That was a unbelievable moment in my life.
That's a rhythm section.
Yeah, it was incredible. But this notion of remakes, I'm kind of one of those guys that says get off the fence, keep it as true to the original, but well done, or take it somewhere new. Generally speaking, I think it's good to take things somewhere new.
Well, on that note, I actually did hear back from the three writers of What Is Hip, the three original writers, because I shared it with them, and they were all very kind and enthusiastic and supportive as well, which was just felt amazing. Like you said, to have a shared similar experience like that is means the world to me. And also it's so interesting to talk with you about it, especially after the fact. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about it as I was writing the arrangement and putting it together. So it's fun to hear your point of view on
And you
how to
know,
approach a
another thing
cover.
about our industry, this notion of serving others, you know, another thing, even with that, with covers, you know, I didn't realize it early on in my career. I didn't realize the impact of it. But man, those guys were thankful. They're all of a sudden they started getting royalty checks on a song that maybe had slowed down on their royalty feed, you know, and
Right.
all of a sudden they're getting checks. And so at that point in my career, I didn't necessarily realize the impact, but to do something to honor someone else's work
Yeah.
and do it well, you know, that's a blessing for them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there are some artists, rare artists, who maybe get offended when people try to redo something. But I know for me, man, if anyone ever wants to, you know, remake my songs and I see that coming into my royalties, I would see that as a huge blessing. So
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
real, you know, when it's done well, I think that's a healthy circle. It you know, we're paying homage to something that really was special to us.
Yeah.
But the flip side of it is some of that returns back to them as well.
It
You know?
certainly does. Absolutely. By the way, you're mentioning your collaboration with Dave Koz, and I love the work that you and Dave do together. There's something very special to me about your collaboration. So I was so excited when I knew that you guys were doing it during the lockdown, and I can't wait to hear that. And I think it's going to be fantastic. So everybody keep their ears out for that very special project also. And a reminder to make sure that you go and stream Darren's new music as well. You know, Rock the World. It's just great. It's really
Thank you,
great.
Terry.
Yeah. And it's also been, before I get to my closing questions, it's been really fun. Just I'll share this with our listeners. You know, you and I have been sharing some unreleased music with each other privately, and that's been just really moving and really fun to do with you. So to be continued, but thank you for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, likewise.
and it's not typically something that artists do. You know, that, you know, let me send you something that I'm going to be putting out next year, or here's something I did and why. So, but it's really special to do that with you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Terry, I want to mention something. I'd be remiss if I didn't. And I want to embarrass you a little bit, but it's in a complimentary way. And I don't know if I shared this with you or not. I know we've talked, you know, naturally when you talk to musicians, oftentimes you talk about the people who have influenced you, or some of the people that working with them was really, really impressed upon us, certain things in our career. And you know, I grew up, I think I told you, on a farm in Canada. So my exposure to the music industry was zero. In what was it, grade school, I moved down to Southern California. I was in San Diego for a few years, and then to Colorado in junior high. I've been in Colorado ever since. And when I moved to Colorado, small town down south, all the way through my bachelor's degree in college. So I was never in a place that had a music industry. So my exposure to the music industry was largely through records, albums, and through television. And so you can bet when David Sanborn started, you know, late night with Sunday night with David Sanborn.
Yeah, that's great.
You can bet, even though it was past my bedtime, I put the videotape in and set the VCR. You know, that was when VCRs just came out. And then one day when I popped on TV and I saw Gerald Albright playing saxophone on TV, you can bet I took notice and I started recording. And you know, I remember that show. I think that was at the Byron Allen show.
The Byron Allen show, yeah.
And this speaks to your heart, because you have worked with literally the best of the best for so many years, but you've done it in a way where you really have served others. It hasn't been a campaign of self. So much so, I remember when I saw Gerald on that show, of course, as a young saxophone, and I love Gerald. He's a good friend of mine. And
me too.
And literally, I mean, easily one of the best sax players to ever live. Just
yes.
disgustingly good.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened back to him playing Forget Me Nots with Patrice Rushen on tenor,
right,
and coming in on some altissimo note like it, like he was eating breakfast. It was
right.
like nothing. But I watched that show, and I was so into what was happening musically on that show. Come to find out this many years later that you were the mastermind, and you were the guy, you were the one that was the musical director and responsible for all of that. And so even before our paths crossed, your music impacted my career, and it impacted me musically. And so I want to thank you for that. And now getting to know you, I respect and admire you even more, because I see a person who has stayed in his lane and who has served the music. And many times in your life and in your career, that means putting other people up front.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how much I admire and respect that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. There's something really sweet about that, and not embarrassing at all. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I was the guitar player, music director, and composer for the show, and I had the great fortune of surrounding myself with some of the most magnificent musicians around, and standing shoulder to shoulder with Gerald Albright, and hearing, my melodies being played by him. And of course, I wanted to, once I established the sound of the band, which I thought was really, really important, then I wanted to make sure that I shared the love with the rest of the band. So I wanted to, because I was surrounded by other artists, masterful artists. Most everybody in the band had their own records out as well. And so, we were replaying their songs as well. But you'll appreciate this too, as a sax player. My, Gerald is such a unique player, especially in the high register, and everybody who comes in, even Najee came in to sub, and just said, I'm not going to be able to play that high, and I said, just drop it an octave. That's, it's fine. It's still
It's hard enough down an octave.
Yeah. Dave Cos too. He came in. Those are the only two people who subbed, were Dave and Najee, and which was a thrill, of course, for me. But I found that my writing kept going higher and higher. I started writing higher for the saxophone on every song, because I knew what it was going to sound like. Gerald would just play it, and it was but I learned a lot about phrasing too, as a musician, standing next to one of the masters, and on just breathing, and, because we played a lot of unisons, and, which was part of the sound that we created for the band. I knew that would work really well. And anyway, but it's so great to know that you're out there watching and listening.
In all of that, Terry, it only enhanced the brilliance of your own playing. So, there are guys in our industry that, they really are, some people operate better from the front seat. Some operate better from the back seat. People's lanes are different. In your case, the way that you so graciously gave everyone space, but never diminishes, the brilliance of your own playing too, and your own artistry. So yeah, just hats off. And yeah, I mean, that
Thank
was
you.
like, I don't remember, we're dating ourselves here. What was that, late 80s, early 90s ish?
Yeah, exactly. Late 80s into the early 90s. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, literally for me, living in Southern Colorado, a tiny town in Southern Colorado with no music scene, no jazz, no funk, no R&B, and turning on the TV whenever I could,
right,
to capture, to see recordings of great performances.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a gift that you've given me at a time when I would not have been exposed to that otherwise.
Thank you so much. And one of my goals, because I thought, well, how can I make this my own, and how can we make this the best it can be, and how can we be different than the other late night talk show bands at the time, Paul Schaefer with the David Letterman Band, the Arsenio Hall Band with Michael Wolff,
Yep.
and the Tonight Show Band with Doc Severinsen. Those were kind of it, and of course David Sanborn doing his late night music show, but not a talk show.
Right.
And the thing is, with the band that I had, these were all world-class musicians. Nathan East on bass the first year, Abraham Laboriel took over the second and third year.
That's rough. Terry.
Luis Conte and Kevin Cloud on drums, and then Ricky Lawson came in, and Mark Hugenberger on keyboards, and it was pretty magnificent. But especially, certainly for my music, it worked great. Because I wrote for the band, because I had some of the best musicians in the music business. But the other thing is, when we would back up, the thing that I really set our intention and musical goal with the band is anytime we would back up another artist, which was every time we did a show, it was every night, regardless of whether it was R&B, jazz, rock, hip hop, pop, country, rap, and we did it all, which was really great. I thought because I knew it's like we're artists, so we know if you put an album out, you've pretty much given a year of thought to this, and the entire process, possibly longer. So when we would back up each artist, I always wanted to make it sound as close to the album as possible. Not our version of it, but the album version. Why wouldn't we? And we did. And I was always really proud of us. And the funny aside is, generally when I would be writing arrangements out, I would be listening to the percussion part or the bass part or the sax part or whatever, and I go, this sounds like Gerald, or I think this might be Luis, or I think it's Nathan, or whoever it was. And pretty much every time we backed up a major artist, the hand would go up. All right, well, who played on this track? And one or two hands would go up. So I got in the habit of just writing out like the first 8 bars of the solo or 4 bars to remind them of what they had done. On the original. So, but we were able to accomplish that. It was one of the things I was very proud of. I want to, I know we only have just a couple moments left, so I want to get to my 3 closing questions. And thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Sure. It's fun to hear your perspective of that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
We've already kind of answered this question, but I just want to still ask it. Since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Very different than what it meant 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I would have said making it was, playing on the biggest festivals, having my song at the top of the charts.
All things you've accomplished, by the way.
Yeah, by God's grace, yes. But at this point in my life, no, what is making it? Making it is having genuine relationships with people that mean a lot to me. Honesty in my relationship with God, honesty in my relationship with others, honesty in my relationship with music. And then the term success. We live in a world, things aren't really overly easy. Things tend to be very complicated. It takes a lot to sustain life on earth right now. And so being able to provide for my family, to have a roof over our heads, to have more. I mean, we're so blessed here in the U.S. We have more than most of the world. And I don't know that we really understand how fortunate we've been. But for me, just the basics in life are beyond a blessing to me. And so now success is framed more in terms of genuineness of relationships in my life.
Which you are also accomplishing. So stay in your lane, man, because it's working.
Don't be a fool. Don't be a fool.
Don't be a fool. My second question is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Yeah. Don't look for any big doors to open. Just go through every small door that opens. And when you do that, do it with your best, with excellence. And for those that are of faith, I would say do it for the glory of God. For those that are not, that don't have faith in God, I would say try to reframe your service to others, excellence to benefit others, not just yourself. And I think when those things come together, I think doors continue to open for people.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. My final question, and then you can have closing thoughts of your own if there's anything you want to add. But this question is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Chill. Yeah. We spend so much time trying to be in control, only to learn that oftentimes the doors that do open, the things that do happen, often they're the areas where we let go. We let go. We stopped putting ourselves as the first priority, and we just said, what is this supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing now? Following that still small voice inside us. And not the voice that says me, 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 the other voice, the voice that says help someone. The voice, like you said, at the supermarket, put a smile on your face. So, yeah.
That's so great. Thank you, Darren. Anything you want to close with besides go check out your new record?
Just thank you, Terry, for having me on and taking time. And you maybe just want to reiterate, encourage others to embrace others, and understand, if we kind of circle back to the beginning of our conversation, for those of us that have been around long enough, we grew up in a world where tolerance meant something else. It actually meant tolerating, loving others, helping others, not because of what they're doing for me, but just because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't mean we all have to see things the same way, but reframing, we just need more of that in our world right now. Everything is so me-focused. People have to view things the same as me. They don't view things the same as you. So how can we impact others and take the gifts that we've been given and make a difference if we're not willing to show people love? I'm almost done here. I know we're just about out of time, but
take your time.
Our viewpoint is, I'm going to treat you well as long as I'm getting something out of it. I'm going to treat you well as long as we kind of see eye to eye on everything. No, I think that we need to go back to the way God designed us, which is human interaction, love, care, thoughtfulness, encouragement,
compassion,
with all of those things, with honesty. Don't betray truth to do any of those things. We still have to be true to what we think is true, and true to what's true. So we have to be honest in it. But yeah, I think handling ourselves with care and compassion for others is something our world desperately needs right now. And I think even above and beyond our music, it's those daily interactions with people that mean they mean more than we might ever know.
Right. You never know how you can change a person's life with a gesture, a smile, an act of kindness.
Yep. At the time when we may not know it, but at the time when they might need it the most. Yeah.
So true. Well, thank you for sharing your faith, your music, your perspective, and your time with me and with our audience today. I really appreciate it, Darren.
Yeah. And I'll make quick mention, Terry, for the new album. Of course, I should plug that.
Yeah.
You guys can hit me up on social media or go to my website, darrenron.com.
darrenron.com, which is actually in the crawl right now for anybody who's looking. But why don't you spell it?
DARRENRAHN.com. And for any that might be more interested in where the music in my life intersects with the different areas of my life, my beautiful relationship with my wife, my friends, my son, my faith in God, they can go check out the album credits on my site. And there's some really cool kind of insight. There's, the thank yous and the people involved. And then there's some cool insight for them as to where the songs and the individual things in the record connect with the different areas of my life too. I've spent some time in the credits writing that out, so they can check that out on the website as well.
I encourage everybody to go do that, darrenrahn.com. Do it today. Do it right now. Thank you again to all of our listeners and our virtual audience. We see you. We appreciate you being with us live. To all of you who are listening and streaming on other formats, we appreciate you as well. And I just want to encourage you to stay safe and stay inspired. And Darren, thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.